there are reports that one person has died in the island nation after protests broke out in Colombo today, specifically after Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country. The protester died after being tear-gassed at the Prime Minister's office when the protesters were trying to barge into the office and ask Ranil Wickremesinghe to step down as well. The 26-year-old protester died after a tear-gas attack, suffered breathing difficulties and was rushed to the hospital but could not make it. Sri Lanka has descended into chaos and anarchy as thousands of protesters barged into the Sri Lankan Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe declared a state of emergency as well. This after he was declared the acting president in the absence of Gotabaya Rajapaksa. After that, he declared emergency after chaotic scenes emerged with people angry over Gotabaya having fled the country and Ranil Wickremesinghe taking charge. Police fired tear gas as thousands mobbed the Prime Minister's office. Water cannons were also used against the protesters and shots were fired in the air to disperse the crowds. But the protesters barged into the Prime Minister's office nonetheless and refused to leave till he steps down as well. NDTV's crew reporting on the ground in Colombo, Shrija and Kumar were caught in the crossfire as well. Gotabaya Rajapaksa had promised to resign on Wednesday and clear the way for a peaceful transition of power after fleeing his official residence in Colombo just before tens of thousands of protesters overran it. But he fled the country overnight on a military jet, reportedly accompanied by his wife, days after demonstrators overran his residence. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa arrived in Malé, the capital of Maldives, at around 3 a.m. this morning. That's what the BBC reported. He was received by a Maldivian government representative at the airport and taken to an undisclosed location under police protection. In fact, he is now expected to now fly from there to another destination, and that is being reported as either Singapore or the UAE. I'm now going across to Kalani Kumarasinghe, joining us on the phone line. Kalani, first of all, I want to ask you about the protester who has died in the tear gas shelling that took place. Are there reports of any others finding it difficult at the moment? Any people injured? Because we saw tear gas, water cannons being used and even firing in the air.
Well, there are no other reports of anyone being in any critical situation. You must note that this has not been something that just happened today. Majority of the protesters have been used to this kind of reaction from the security forces whenever the protests have turned volatile. So I suppose a majority of the protesters out there are sort of accustomed to this. No other reports of anyone being in critical condition so far.
Kalani, were the worst scenes witnessed outside the Prime Minister's office today?
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch that.
Kalani, were the worst scenes as far as protesters and the security forces trying to stop them were witnessed at the Prime Minister's office?
I don't suppose these are the worst scenes because there was more brutal violence unfolding in during earlier protests. It is just that the tear gas was incessant today, especially this afternoon. But there have been extreme violence recorded, especially on the 9th weekend and earlier as well, when protesters initially stormed President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's Mirihana residence. So the violence that we saw that night was far more worse than this.
Kalani, what are we expecting now? The protesters are in the Prime Minister's office. They want him to step down as well, creating pretty much a constitutional crisis in the country at the moment. What are you hearing? Is there going to be any dialogue between the government that is represented at the moment by Ranil Wickremesinghe and the protesters?
Well, the latest we are hearing from Parliament members is that there was a party leaders meeting that happened a short while ago. And during that, we are hearing that the Tri-Forces as well as the Inspector General of Police had earlier met Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe and had urged him to respect the people's wishes and to step down. Of course, I don't believe that the that Wickremesinghe agreed to this. Subsequent to this, the military leaders as well as the police head had also made a request from the party leaders permission to retaliate if there is an event where the Parliament of Sri Lanka is attacked by the protesters. Of course, the representatives who attended this meeting had said that they cannot grant such permission, and the only solution at this point is for Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe to step down. So this is where we are at the moment. And as you have seen, things are escalating pretty quickly, and the story is unfolding pretty quickly, and we have to just wait and see what unfolds next.
Kalani, many thanks for speaking with NDTV, and do stay safe. We understand the situation that the journalists are as well in. In fact, our correspondent Shrija, who was covering the protest today, was also tear-gassed. So we completely understand the situation that you're mentioning as it unfolds in Sri Lanka. Protesters wanting Ranil Wickremesinghe to step down as well.